Ancient people were not supposed to have steam engines, brain surgery, color-changing glass, secret fire, and underground cities with better engineering than a lot of modern places. And yet they did. These are 33 ancient technologies that still make historians, engineers, and everyone with a functioning brain ask the same question. How did they pull this off? 1. Heron of Alexandria basically built the world's most frustrating almost invention. In the 1st century, he described the aeolipile, a hollow sphere that spun when steam blasted out of bent nozzles. That means ancient engineers had already figured out how to turn steam into rotary motion, which is the kind of sentence that should come with a warning label for anyone who has ever wondered why the Industrial Revolution took so long. And what did they do with it? Mostly treated as a demonstration piece for temples and rich people who enjoyed watching clever gadgets do party tricks. Humanity was standing there with the rough draft of a steam engine and somehow decided, yes, nice toy, now let us get back to hauling rocks and complaining about taxes. 2. Flexible glass is one of those Roman stories that sounds so fake it loops back around to being irresistible. Ancient writers claimed a glassmaker showed Emperor Tiberius a bowl that did not shatter when dropped. It dented. Then the craftsman supposedly tapped it back into shape like he was fixing a bronze helmet. And because Rome could never enjoy anything normally, the story says Tiberius had the man killed so gold and silver would not lose value. Now, historians generally treat the whole thing as apocryphal, which is a polite academic way of saying, this may be a legend and Rome loved dramatic gossip. But the fact the story survived at all tells you Romans could imagine advanced materials, which is honestly alarming enough. 3. Greek fire was the Byzantine Empire's way of saying, we would like naval warfare to become everyone else's nightmare. This was a state-secret incendiary weapon that could be pumped through tubes, hurled in containers, and according to medieval descriptions, kept burning even on water. Which is rude. Very rude. Modern scholars generally think it was petroleum-based, but the exact recipe is still unknown because the Byzantines guarded it like the last clean password on Earth. That secrecy worked brilliantly right up until the formula vanished. So now we know it was real. We know it terrified enemies. And we know water was not the hero of this story. Somewhere in history sits the recipe for medieval sea napalm, and it is still ghosting us. 4. The so-called Quimbaya airplanes are exactly the kind of artifact that starts family arguments, internet wars, and 10 terrible documentaries. These small gold pendants from pre-Columbian Colombia are usually classified by archaeologists as stylized animal forms. And that is the sober answer. The less sober answer is that some of them look uncannily like tiny aircraft, with swept wings, vertical tails, and the kind of silhouette that makes modern people immediately start yelling about aerodynamics. Museums and archaeologists point to birds, insects, fish, and bats as the inspiration, which is fair because ancient artists loved zoomorphic forms. But still, when an object made more than 1,000 years ago looks like a miniature fighter jet, do not expect the internet to behave like adults about it. 5. The Baghdad Battery is what happens when archaeology accidentally discovers an object that looks suspiciously like science homework. These jars, found near Baghdad, combine ceramic, copper, iron, and bitumen in a way that makes it possible to generate a small electric current if you add an acidic liquid. So yes, in theory, you can make a weak battery-like cell from them. In practice, archaeologists are not convinced that was their purpose, and there is no accepted evidence that ancient Mesopotamians were casually electroplating jewelry in the back room. Which leaves us with the most annoying answer in history. Maybe it could work as a battery, but maybe that was not what it was for. It is the archaeological version of finding a toaster in a tomb and not knowing if it was sacred or just weird storage. 6. Mohenjo-daro had urban plumbing so sensible it makes later civilizations look deeply unserious. Around 4,000 years ago, this Indus Valley city had houses with bathing areas, drains, and sanitation systems carefully built into the urban layout. Some homes had toilet-like installations, wastewater ran into covered drains along the streets, and cleanliness was not treated like some optional luxury for rich weirdos. Meanwhile, much later cities in other parts of the world were still treating sewage as an adventure. What makes Mohenjo-daro so impressive is not one flashy invention but the sheer normality of competence. They designed an entire city around water management and sanitation like adults. There is nothing mystical here, just the deeply offensive fact that a Bronze Age city was more organized than a depressing number of places that came after it. 7. Damascus steel has the kind of reputation that sounds made up by a blacksmith with excellent marketing. Medieval accounts praise these blades as sharp, resilient, and weirdly beautiful, with flowing patterns in the metal that looked like water. Modern analysis found nanoscale structures in some examples, including cementite nanowires and famously reported carbon nanotubes, which is the moment history suddenly starts sounding like a laboratory accident with swords. The steel was made from woods, a high-quality crucible steel, and the exact old process was eventually lost. That is the painful part. They were not doing nanotechnology in the modern scientific sense, but they were absolutely producing extraordinary microstructures through practice, heat control, impurities, and experience. In other words, ancient smiths were pulling off materials science so advanced they could not fully explain it either, which honestly feels even cooler. 8. The Hal Saflieni. Hippogam on Malta is already creepy in the best possible way because it is a prehistoric underground temple complex carved into rock. Then you find out it has bizarre acoustic behavior, and suddenly the place upgrades itself into full ancient mind game territory. Tests have confirmed that certain chambers strongly resonate, with famous attention on a band around 110 Hz. That means a human voice can swell, roll through the walls, and sound less like one person speaking and more like the building itself has joined the conversation. Some of the wilder claims about brain alteration are debated, so let us keep our feet on the ground. Still, if prehistoric builders intentionally shaped a ritual space to weaponize sound, that is already an outrageous flex. Most people struggle to set up decent audio in a living room. 9. Heron did not stop at spinning steam balls. He also described a system that could make temple doors open automatically when a fire was lit on an altar. Imagine being an ancient priest. You light the sacred flame, hidden pressure. Changes move water and weights, and the giant doors swing open as if the gods themselves just hit the dramatic entrance button. That is not magic. That is pneumatics and clever engineering wearing a religious costume. Which, to be fair, is some of the best theater ever invented. The real genius here is not only the mechanism itself, but the psychological effect. Ancient visitors would see divine power. Heron saw air pressure, siphons, and motion transfer. So yes, the Greeks were out here turning ritual into special effects centuries before theme parks figured out animatronics. 10. Andean stonework at places like Sacsayhuaman and Pumapunku looks less like construction and more like geology deciding to become perfectionist art. At Sacsayhuaman, enormous blocks were cut and fitted together so tightly that mortar was unnecessary, and the walls still handle earthquakes better than a lot of modern ego-driven architecture. Pumapunku is not Inca. It belongs to the earlier Tiwanaku world, which somehow makes the whole thing even more annoying for anyone hoping history would become simpler. The stones are huge, the cuts are precise, and the joins look almost absurdly deliberate. No, this does not require aliens, lasers, or time travelers with bad hobbies. It does, however, require admitting that ancient masons had a level of planning, skill, and patience that makes modern shortcut culture look embarrassingly fragile. 11. Chinese magic mirrors are one of those artifacts that make you distrust reality for a few minutes. In normal light, the front looks like a polished bronze mirror, and the back has a decorative pattern. Fine, reasonable. Then you reflect sunlight from the polished side onto a wall, and somehow the pattern from the back appears in the projected light as if the metal has decided transparency is optional. Ancient Chinese craftsmen were doing this at least by the Han period, and modern analysis shows the trick comes from microscopic variations on the front surface created during casting, polishing, and stress in the bronze. So the mirror is not actually magic, which is a shame, but it is doing precision optical effects at a scale your eyes cannot detect. Ancient artisans were basically hiding engineering inside decoration just to mess with your confidence. 12. Ancient Peruvian trepanation sounds horrifying until you realize the survival rates were disturbingly good. Trepanation means opening the skull, often to treat trauma. And in Peru, this practice developed over centuries into something that looks less like madness and more like surgical competence. By the Inca period, studies suggest survival rates were often around 75 to 83%, with low signs of infection, which is better than outcomes from some later military surgeries during the American Civil War. That comparison should make everyone in modernity sit down quietly for a second. These surgeons did not have antibiotics, modern anesthesia, or stainless steel tools. But they did have experience, cleaner methods than you would expect, and enough anatomical knowledge to avoid killing a huge number of patients. Ancient skull surgery should not be impressive. It absolutely is. 13. The Sushruta Samhita proves that ancient Indian medicine was not just collecting herbs and hoping for the best. It includes one of the earliest known descriptions of cataract surgery, using a procedure later called couching. The surgeon used a fine instrument to dislodge the clouded lens so light could enter the eye again. Was it as safe or effective as modern eye surgery? Obviously not. Nobody is volunteering for 6th century before the Common Era ophthalmology over a modern clinic. But that is not the point. The point is that people were already thinking systematically about anatomy, surgical instruments, technique, and patient treatment long before a lot of other cultures had even decided medicine should maybe involve more than prayer and guessing. Ancient India was out here writing surgical manuals while the rest of humanity was still improvising with confidence. 14. The Antikythera mechanism is the artifact historians pull out when they want everyone in the room to stop underestimating ancient Greece. Recovered from a shipwreck and dated to around the 2nd century before the Common Era, this device used a dense system of bronze gears to model astronomical cycles, predict eclipses, and track calendars and games. In plain English, it was a mechanical computer, not a calculator with 2 gears and a prayer. A real, deeply sophisticated analog machine. The insult to our modern ego is that nothing comparably complex in geared technology shows up again in Europe for many centuries. So every time someone imagines the ancient world as a bunch of guys in togas yelling philosophy at each other, remember that somebody also built a pocket cosmos with precision gearing and casually dropped it into the sea. 15. Derinkuyu is what happens when paranoia gets an engineering budget. This underground city in Cappadocia goes down roughly 85 meters and could shelter as many as 20,000 people, along with food stores, animals, and daily life. We are talking ventilation shafts, wells, storage rooms, presses, chapels, and heavy rolling stone doors that could seal sections from the inside. It was not one cave somebody happened to sleep in. It was a multi-level survival machine carved into volcanic rock and expanded over time by different communities. The wildest part is how practical it all is. Fresh air, water, movement control, compartmentalization. Somebody looked at the possibility of invasion and said, "Simple solution, let us build a hidden city under the city." Casual. Completely normal behavior. Not at all the work of people who had clearly seen some things. 16. The Lycurgus Cup is the ancient Roman equivalent of showing up to dinner with a drinking glass made from sorcery and refusing to elaborate. In reflected light, it looks green. Shine light through it, and it glows red. That dichroic effect comes from tiny gold and silver particles embedded in the glass. Particles so small they sit in the nanometer range. Which means the Romans, whether intentionally or by gloriously lucky accident, produced a nanostructured material 16 centuries before anyone had the vocabulary to brag about it on a conference stage. And they did not use it for laboratory equipment or military optics. No, they used it to make an absurdly fancy cup. That is almost the best part. Humanity reached across time to whisper, "Yes, advanced materials are wonderful. Now please pour wine into them and be dramatic." 17. The Sabu disc looks like somebody lost a machine part in ancient Egypt and then lied about it for 5,000 years. Found in a First Dynasty tomb at Saqqara, it is made from fragile schist and shaped like a shallow bowl with a central hub and 3 curving lobes. It should not look this modern. It really should not. The function remains unclear, and that uncertainty is exactly why people lose their minds over it. Was it ceremonial, symbolic, or part of some practical process we no longer recognize? Nobody knows for sure. What we do know is that carving such a delicate object from brittle stone took serious skill, and the design feels weirdly engineered to modern eyes. It is the archaeological equivalent of finding a hubcap in a pharaoh's closet and trying to stay calm about it. 18. The Persian Yakhchal was a desert refrigerator built by people who looked at brutal heat and said, "Skill issue." These domed ice houses used thick insulating walls, underground storage, shade, evaporation, and night sky cooling to make and preserve ice in hot, arid climates. Some were in use by around 400 before the Common Era, which means ancient Persians were solving thermal engineering problems with mud brick, geometry, and physics, while the rest of the world was still treating ice as a seasonal rumor. The genius is that the system works with the environment instead of fighting it. Water could freeze in shallow pools during cold desert nights, then get stored in the insulated chamber for summer use. So yes, people in antiquity were making ice in the desert without electricity. Meanwhile, modern apartments panic when one compressor sneezes. 19. The Saqqara bird is the kind of object that launches 1,000 overexcited theories before science walks in with a clipboard. It is a small wooden model from ancient Egypt, usually dated to around 200 before the Common Era. And it does have a shape that makes modern people think of gliders. There is just one small problem. Detailed aerodynamic studies do not support the claim that it proves ancient Egyptian flight. The object appears too heavy, unstable, and poorly balanced to function as a real glider in its original form. Which means the mainstream answer is much less cinematic. It was probably a bird model, ceremonial object, toy, or decorative piece. Still, the reason it keeps haunting these conversations is obvious. It looks suspiciously aerodynamic enough to start drama, but not aerodynamic enough to finish the argument. 20. For years, people thought the weapons of the Terracotta army had some lost ancient chrome plating technology because many bronze pieces remained astonishingly well preserved after more than 2,000 years. That would have been incredible. It also turns out to be wrong. More recent research shows the chromium traces are not evidence of an anti-rust treatment on the weapons themselves, but contamination from nearby lacquer used on other parts of the burial assemblage. So the original miracle solution is gone, but the mystery does not entirely disappear. The bronzes were still made well, buried in favorable soil, and preserved under conditions that helped them survive, which is somehow even more annoying for conspiracy lovers. The secret was not alien chrome plating. It was excellent craft, good burial chemistry, and science ruining everyone's dramatic speeches again. 21. The Nazca lines are giant geoglyphs carved into the Peruvian desert, and the first thing everybody says about them is usually wrong. No, they are not visible only from the air. Some can be seen from surrounding hills and high ground. But yes, they are absolutely best appreciated from above, which is still a deeply strange design choice if you are creating sacred art with no airplane in sight. UNESCO describes them as one of archaeology's greatest enigmas, and scholars still debate exactly how the lines functioned. Ritual, pilgrimage, water symbolism, ceremonial pathways, maybe several purposes across different periods. That is the real answer. Not aliens, just complexity, which is less flashy but somehow more impressive. An entire culture covered the desert with giant signs, animals, and lines, and left us arguing about it centuries later. Mission accomplished, honestly. 22. Roman concrete is the construction material equivalent of an old man quietly outliving everyone who laughed at him. Modern marine concrete often cracks, corrodes, and degrades. Roman seawater concrete, in some ancient harbor structures, has spent roughly 2,000 years getting slapped by waves and somehow responding by growing durable mineral structures inside itself. Research shows Roman builders used volcanic ash, lime, and seawater, and that chemical interaction helped form crystals that improved long-term resilience. More recent work also points to hot mixing and lime clasts that can contribute to self-healing when cracks form. So yes, the Romans accidentally or deliberately made a material that does not just survive harsh conditions but works with them. They were pouring infrastructure that ages like legend, while a depressing number of modern projects age like yogurt in a parked car. 23. The Nimrud lens is a small piece of rock crystal from ancient Assyria that has managed to irritate certainty for about 3,000 years. The British Museum notes it could have served as a crude magnifying glass, which already makes it interesting because magnification changes what humans can make, inspect, and obsess over. But the exact purpose remains uncertain, and some scholars have suggested it may simply have been decorative inlay. Then, because humans can never resist escalating, other people started asking whether it could be part of some early optical instrument. A telescope claim is far from accepted, so let us not sprint into fantasy. The real mystery is simpler and better. It is an object that clearly does something optical, yet still refuses to tell us whether it was practical tool, luxury ornament, or both. 24. The Baigong pipes are a perfect example of why ancient mysteries can be both fascinating and deeply unserious at the same time. In photos, these pipe-like features in China look like the rusted leftovers of some forgotten industrial system punched into rock. So naturally, people started inventing stories about prehistoric technology, vanished civilizations, and probably 3 aliens named Steve. The problem is that scientists have offered a much less cinematic explanation. Britannica notes that the leading interpretation is fossilized casts of tree roots or similar natural processes, which means the greatest mystery here may not be ancient engineering at all, but our own unstoppable need to see factories everywhere. Still, you can understand the impulse. When nature produces something that looks exactly like old plumbing, history fans are going to start vibrating. 25. Ulfbert swords had the medieval North acting the way modern people act around limited edition supercars. These blades, many from the 9th to 11th centuries, carried the name Ulfbert and were associated with exceptional quality. Some metallurgical studies and museum interpretations argue that certain examples used unusually pure, high-carbon steel, even crucible steel, superior to what most of Europe could reliably produce at the time. That would make them stronger, more flexible, and generally unfair in a fight. To make things even messier, not every sword with the name was equal. Some were likely genuine top-tier blades, others were probably knockoffs cashing in on the brand, which means Ulfbert was not just a sword, it was medieval tech prestige, luxury metallurgy, and counterfeit culture all jammed into one sharp object. Very human, really. 26. The Longyu Caves feel like someone hid an industrial-scale excavation project under a village and then deleted the paperwork. These giant artificial caverns in China were rediscovered in the 1990s after locals drained ponds and found vast carved chambers underneath. Research places them at around 2,000 years old, and their walls, pillars, and ceilings show consistent chisel patterns and strikingly regular execution. That alone would be enough. But then comes the maddening part. There are no clear historical records explaining who carved them, why they did it, or what the caves were for. This was not a random hole in a hill. It was massive, organized labor. So now the caves sit there radiating pure ancient competence while history shrugs, like it forgot to save the file. 27. Sumerian cylinder seals are tiny objects with absolutely gigantic main character energy. These little carved cylinders were rolled over wet clay to leave repeating scenes, signatures, symbols, and administrative marks. That sounds straightforward until you look closely and realize the engraving can be unbelievably fine. We are talking miniature imagery with details so small that modern viewers often need magnification just to appreciate the work. Which raises the deliciously annoying question of how artisans in the ancient Near East achieved such precision so consistently. The obvious answer is not magic, just elite craftsmanship, specialized tools, hard stones, training, and terrifyingly steady hands. But that does not make it less impressive. Bureaucracy in ancient Mesopotamia was not just paperwork. It was paperwork executed by artists who could carve a whole visual universe onto something the size of your thumb joint. Overachievers, all of them. 28. Göbekli Tepe is the site that walked into archaeology, flipped the table, and forced everyone to rethink the script. UNESCO describes it as monumental architecture erected by hunter-gatherers between about 9600 and 8200 before the Common Era, which is already absurd enough without adding internet spice. Massive T-shaped pillars, animal carvings, coordinated labor, ritual architecture, all before farming settlements looked the way many people assumed they had to. Some fans love attaching astronomical supertheories to it, and maybe future research will sort more of that out. But the basic reality is already wild. People without cities in the later sense and without metal tools still organize themselves to quarry, carve, move, and raise megaliths that change the timeline of civilization. History was supposed to be simple here. Göbekli Tepe said absolutely not. 29. Aztec chinampas were not floating gardens in the cartoon sense, but raised agricultural fields in shallow lakes. And they were so productive that modern sustainability people keep staring at them with professional jealousy. These engineered plots had canals between them, access to constant moisture, nutrient-rich mud, and a layout that turned water into an agricultural ally instead of a problem. Some scholarly accounts say the system could support up to 7 harvests a year under the right conditions, which is the kind of productivity that makes modern monoculture look emotionally exhausted. The beauty of chinampas is that they were ecological, urban, and practical all at once. The Aztecs were feeding a huge city with a wetland system that worked with local conditions brilliantly. We still study them because, frankly, they were cooking, and we know it. 30. Ancient Egyptian granite drilling is one of those topics where the facts are impressive enough without the dramatic exaggeration, yet people still insist on bringing a flamethrower to the conversation. Yes, spiral grooves and drilled granite cores from Egypt are real. Yes, they look startlingly precise. And yes, experimental archaeology supports the idea that tubular drills with abrasives could achieve remarkable results. But the famous claim that Egyptian drills cut granite 500 times faster than modern diamond drills comes from old interpretations and is heavily disputed. So let us keep the good part and throw out the circus. The real mystery is not impossible speed. It is how consistently ancient craftspeople, using copper tools and abrasives, managed to work extremely hard stone with a level of control that still makes people on the internet lose their minds every 6 business days. 31. The Iron Pillar of Delhi has spent about 16 centuries standing outside in the weather and refusing to rust like normal iron. That is not because India had stainless steel before everybody else. It is because this wrought iron pillar has a chemistry and environment that helped form an unusually protective passive film on the surface over time. High phosphorus content in the iron played a major role, and alternating wet and dry conditions helped build a stable barrier that dramatically slowed corrosion. Which is still amazing, just in a more scientifically offensive way. Ancient metalworkers forged a monumental iron object that not only survived but became a long-term material science case study. Most modern metal objects see one bad season and start looking like abandoned shopping carts. This thing stood there for centuries like corrosion was a suggestion, not a rule. 32. The stone spheres of Costa Rica look like a civilization decided geometry itself should become a flex. Hundreds of these carved spheres are known, some weighing up to 15 tons, and many are astonishingly round. Archaeologists link them to the Daquis culture, and the most grounded explanations suggest they were status markers, arranged in important places, perhaps near elite residences or ceremonial spaces. So no, they are not random boulders polished by magical weather or abandoned cannonballs from Atlantis. Humans made them. The part that still bites is the labor and intent. They were shaped from hard stone, moved, placed, and in many cases later looted or relocated, which means we lost some of the original context. We know more than mystery peddlers admit, but not enough to fully shut down the wow factor. And frankly, good luck doing that anyway. 33. Nan Madol is the sort of place that makes ordinary ruins look like they are not trying hard enough. Built on artificial islets over a coral reef in Micronesia, it used basalt columns hauled from elsewhere on Pohnpei and stacked in log cabin-style walls to create a canal-laced ceremonial and political complex. Some stones weighed many tons, and total estimates for the moved stone run into the hundreds of thousands of metric tons. Not the ridiculous internet fantasy numbers, but still a staggering human effort. The site is often called the Venice of the Pacific, which sounds romantic until you remember it was built by moving massive stone onto reef platforms without modern machinery. Scholars can trace the basalt sources and describe the architecture, but the logistics are still the jaw-dropper. Somebody looked at a reef and thought, yes, let us put a stone city there. Unhinged. Brilliant. So after all that, here's the argument I want in the comments. Which of these technologies makes modern humans look the dumbest for losing it? And what ancient invention should have been in this video, but wasn't? Drop your pick, start the fight properly, then like the video, subscribe, and stick around for more history that is way stranger than it has any right to be.